Islamic movement.
Mr. Fukamachi, thank you very much for being on our program today.
Thank you very much for calling me to talk on this program today.
To begin, would you briefly tell us the status quo of the Islamic movement in Southwest Asia?
When we say the status quo of the Islamic movement in Southwest Asia, we usually talk about the Taliban movement in Afghanistan, which I'll be going into this problem in detail later on. But in other countries, like the Central Asian countries, which are very close to Afghanistan, the Islamic movement is quite different from the Islamic revivalism that is seen in Afghanistan these days. And in China, too, which is very close to Afghanistan and Pakistan. Especially in the Xinjiang area, people seem to be going towards Islamic revivalism these days due to some reason or due to the import of Islamic movement from Afghanistan through Pakistan. But we don't go into details about that. And in India, although the Muslims occupy only a little over 11% of the whole population, they are not really Islamic fundamentalists. They cannot be Islamic fundamentalists in the usual sense, because they are suffering sort of from backlash of Hindu people. I say backlash because the Islamic movement in other areas of Southwest Asia is growing very fast, and the Hindu revivalism is gaining power in India. And Islamic people, Muslim people in India have to become rather moderate. And in the case of Pakistan, the situation is rather different. I'll talk about that later on. Islam has a very special term which they call in Arabic Ummah, or international community of Islamic community, international Islamic community. It means that the Muslims all over the world belong to the same community. Mentally, yes. This does not necessarily mean that all the Muslims in the world belong to the same ethnic groups or same nations or same countries. We should not overestimate the power of this Islamic community, although it is very important. And another thing that I have to emphasize here is that when we talk about Islam and Islamic movement, we tend to become, especially those people who do not seem to like Islam very much, especially those who live in Europe and America.
It has been over 3 years since the Islamic fundamentalists, Taliban, control more than 90% of Afghanistan. Would you tell us what religious principle Afghanistan's Taliban have?
The Taliban, by the way, is a plural form of Talib. It's a person word meaning religious student. And these religious students, they are also warriors too these days, but they are sort of revolutionists who believe in something great, according to what they say. And they are not very different mentally from the Puritanists of Britain of the 16th and the 17th centuries. And their Islamic revivalism is not necessarily synonymous with terrorism, although Americans and some European people seem to regard Islamic revivalism to be synonymous with terrorism. I don't agree at all. These Taliban in Afghanistan have been fighting, well, actually they have, well, this is rather complex. The Islamic movement in Afghanistan started a long time ago, but to talk about something about the recent past. After the Soviet Union sent in its forces, about 100,000 people, warriors, to Afghanistan, the Afghan people, especially Muslim people, well, they are mostly Muslim people, Muslim revivalists, especially started fighting against the Russian forces. Well, I should say Soviet forces, not necessarily Russian only. And because they wanted to go back to the days of the Holy Prophet of the 7th century. And after the Russian troops left Afghanistan in 1989, then all these Islamic people who left Afghanistan as refugees to Iran and Pakistan, who are called Muhajirin, or refugees, they went back to Afghanistan and they established a new government. But then they started a civil war very, very soon. And because of the corruption, sort of these Islamic Mujahideen warriors, refugees, the Taliban people came up to go back to the real pure Islamic world that they used to know of centuries ago. And this is the Taliban people conquered more than 90% of Afghanistan by force, all right, but by force. This is why the American people, and people or Christians in general, seem to call them terrorists. But then, when we talk about this sort of things, we have to remember that human history is colored with terrorism, organizational state terrorism, wars. And this does not necessarily legitimize the Taliban's rule, and yet they are not really terrorists, as many people consider. Rather, after they have started ruling Afghanistan, terrorism has diminished. And the people in Afghanistan, especially people in the lower strata of the society, welcome the Taliban rule because their rule is much better than the rule by the refugee warriors who are only trying to rule Afghanistan only for the sake of themselves. And this is something that many people don't seem to know. Well, those people who met the Taliban warriors or Taliban politicians say that they are religious, they are gentlemen.
So, we're kind of looking different angle.
Yes.
So, than who they are, actually. Okay. And would you tell us the relationship between Afghanistan's Taliban and Pakistan, which recently experienced coup?
Pakistan, this is another thing that I must mention. Pakistan is often said to be the country which established or which helped the Taliban movement to grow up. It is true to a certain extent, but the Taliban movement is basically an Afghan indigenous movement which grew up in Afghanistan all by themselves. And Pakistan helped the Taliban to grow up for the sake of their own economic revival, because they wanted to establish a trade route through Afghanistan, from Pakistan to the Central Asian countries. Because Pakistan was sort of forsaken by the United States in 1989, after the end of the Cold War. Although Pakistan used to be a sort of an ally of the United States, the United States stopped giving financial or military aid to Pakistan after the Russians left Afghanistan. And this is what, according to what many people say, yesterday's friend is today's enemy. Pakistan suddenly became an enemy of the United States, according to the American viewpoint, because the Pakistan started developing a nuclear bomb, which many people call in Pakistan an Islamic bomb.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we are running out of time. While Pakistan is located in Asia, it falls within the Islamic sphere, which has established and extended its power from the east to west of the Eurasian continent. In addition, it is said that Pakistan has strong ties with Afghanistan, Central Asia, and the Middle East that you just mentioned. And the situation in Southwest Asia is expected to continue to be complex in the future. Now, Mr. Fukamachi, what role do you think the Islamic movement will play in this development?
Well, it is quite fluid in the sense that any movement, just not the Islamic movement, is very often influenced by international or domestic political economy. And I feel these days that the Islamic movement in the immediate future is going to be a sort of casting. It's going to play a sort of a casting vote, the role of a casting vote in the international political economy, especially when you think of the energy problem of the world, which is growing very fast. And because I say this, because where the natural gas and oil are produced, the place is concentrated in the Islamic countries, Islamic sphere. You take the Caspian region too, in Saudi Arabia too, all these areas. And the Islamic movement in that sense is going to have a political say too in the world.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you very much for letting me talk.